professional, very bilingual. Blow shit out the frame, aim at the stack quo.
Peace, Super Heruian. You are now tuned in live to Super Heru Radio. I'm your host, Aseer the Super Tears, along with you, my co-host, Selena the Empress 10,000 Years, more Black Hawk, Saga Assad, the whole fam. You once again, thank you again for coming through to Super Heru Radio as we do it as best we can every Monday night from 9 to 11. The song you just heard is called Super Heru Radio, self-titled actually, and that's off of the soundtrack mixtape album CD by Team Cordoba, which is myself and the Empress of 10,000 Years. And that's available right now at www.darkskull418, also through iTunes and Amazon and stuff like that. For those people who are interested in a real good read, please check out, go to www.darkskull418 to check out the Dark Skull 418, the world's most dangerous comic book novel. Again, created, written, and drawn by myself. I see the duplicates of 575 pages of real talk, put forth in the context of super historic sci-fi fantasy. So, for those of us that grew up on that, which is basically all of us in America growing up in a fiction, I think it would be a great read. And don't let the page count discourage you. It's very quick. Also available on Kindle, Nook, EPUB, iMac, all of that. So please check it out. So, my good brothers and sisters, so much, right? So much has been popping off in the actual quote-unquote country or countries thus far. One of the biggest things is getting the Moors in America, happy and in open arms is this whole Hillary Clinton thing. Hillary and the flag, yo. Okay. Hillary and the flags, yo. A lot of people feel that this is in some way some sort of recognition, and that this in some way, really shows how far we have come as a country or whatever. And some people are looking at it and putting a lot more into it than it actually really is, unfortunately. I think it's great, but unless you're sitting in front of that flag and talking about you specifically as a quote-unquote Moor, or as it stands a denizen, like the term Moorish American or something like that, then that's necessarily going to equate to it's not really about you. And because a lot of our people don't understand statecraft, which is the policies by which governments choose to run themselves, we have to understand that deception is a useful tool of statecraft. Also, we have to just do the knowledge that because a lot of us lack the understanding of what international law really applies to outside of the United States or outside the traditional jurisdiction of what we perceive as our own selves autonomously, representing ourselves as individual nations, all that really stands is that when she was making the address, she happened to maybe be in the Moroccan consulate, the so-called Moroccan consulate, or the so-called one of the minions associated with Morocco. And in that, it is subsequent protocol for whenever you are a visiting dignitary and you are administering letters or addresses to another country, it is subsequent for you to have the flag of the host country that is hosting your state present, usually on the left side, right? It just so happens to be that the serendipitous aspect of the so-called way that the dollar bill is set up, where you have the United States government on one side and then the old republic on the other in the form of the pyramid, is coinciding with the whole Moroccan thing. But again, we have to remember that there are a lot of discrepancies between us and the present Kingdom of Morocco, and that the present Kingdom of Morocco do not refer to themselves as Moors. They do not. They refer to themselves as Moroccans, because most of them were French occupies that became Moroccan after the Battle of what was that? The Battle of Algiers. And so most of them basically switched nationality, basically, and went from the French Republic, the French Protectorate aspect of it. Now that Wali Pasha, the great Black Panther, or Pasha, or last Moorish emperor of the Old Dominion, Morocco, or Al-Maghrebia, came into power and lost power right after 1956, which is a significant year for us when you are studying sovereignty as well as nationality, indigenous rights, native rights, all of these things. That for the most part, I can see that a lot of people still don't understand, even though they're making a lot of different speculatory judgments and speakings of it. If you've noticed in the community, there's been a since the offset of some of the, let's say, internal wars that have been going on, there's been a disparaging aspect of people not really getting into that aspect of things anymore. It doesn't mean it's less relevant. It just means that we are now going through a different phase in terms of protocol, in terms of level of importance. And this sign of Hillary and the flags is basically reminiscent of this new moon energy. You know what I'm saying? This whole thing basically... No. They created that, and it basically was part of this whole new moon energy to kind of like thrust everybody in. Kind of like a couple of months ago when they had Moors around the country being recognized as Moorish American Day or something like that throughout the thing, which again is great. I'm not trying to downplay any of that or anybody that was involved with that. I'm not saying that it's not a good thing to be recognized whenever. I'm just saying that to be recognized means that you need the approval of a superior body by international law, statutes, and protocols is what I'm saying. So that means that when we are basically putting ourselves up to be recognized by someone else, we are still not in our present position. Therefore, what it is we are trying to be recognized for then actually cannot be fully executed due to the fact that we are still basically guessing, because we are still going to outside forces for validation. And if you are the true sovereign, quote unquote, then that doesn't mean anything. Now you have to remember, the term sovereign prior to 1900 or whatever was really dealing in terms of talking about gold. I mean, yes, it was applied to people who could run countries and stuff like that, but for the most part, that was another name for gold or silver, whether or not you would be paying your debt in sovereigns or not. So the word has gone through a lot of different incarnations, but in its present incarnation in the United States, it is basically the juxtaposition word that exists between those of us that's part of the old, let's say, movements that want to create some sort of what people perceive as indigenous movement on this hemisphere, and those who consider themselves, quote-unquote, patriots. But I'm here to tell you, as of the last so-called election, there really is no patriot movement anymore. Most of those, quote-unquote, old patriots have been absorbed into what is now the Tea Party, or into some quasi-militia or, so-called, hammer-skin movement that's going on out there. So what this then means is that, like all radical organizations, once they find a way to be integrated into the American substrata, they become active participants in it. You know what I'm saying? This is how most movements in the Americas get shut down anyway, by people basically absorbing themselves into the greater aspect of the United States, but that's not what the United States was set up to do. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the significant difference between the United States and America? Well, there are a lot of differences, but the main difference is that one came out of the other. In regards to how great the United States is or becomes or became, it can never be as great as the aforementioned American Republic as it stood or as it stands. Therefore, we're talking about something, anytime we're talking about something coming out of something else, we're talking about a subordinate jurisdiction. So when we talk about the United States, what we're really talking about is a unilateral, universally accepted subordinate jurisdiction over the traditional, predominant kingdom of God on earth. The United States being, let's say, the hired gun to come in and basically hold things down till the world gets itself into a different position and then can realign itself back to the original. Yet that can only happen when the original people are put in their original perspective. But that original perspective of the original people can only be accessed by those people who truly consider themselves and understand the difference between what is original and what isn't. So man is original, yet mankind isn't. You see what I'm saying? They like to put the term mankind, the word of art mankind, into the universal bubble context, as if another way to say man than in plural. But man in plural is men. So if that's the case, and the plural of man is men, then what the hell is mankind? Who's that talking about? I know things is changing. When I looked at Black Dynamite this week, and people hit me up on it with Yakub on it. And they had him as the big head scientist, everything. You might as well have been reading one of the holy tablets about that. And of course, it was shrouded in jokes. But essentially, we know the real root of what's going on. So bravo to those people at Black Dynamite, because that really blew my mind and showed me how much they have pushed through. And again, this came through the new moon at the same time the thing happened with this chick Hillary and the flags, in between the two flags. But if you notice, she was situated in turquoise, I believe, which again is one of the sacred gems of the original people on this side of the hemisphere. But I'm not talking about Native American. The closest term that could represent you in that sense when you're dealing in things like that would then be closest like American Indian. But a Native American is somebody that's not from here. That's somebody that's just native to America, meaning that they became native. You ever see, like Tarzan? Tarzan would have been, let's say, a native African. Because he went to Africa and chose to go native. See? He went to Africa and chose to basically just emulate what he perceived the Africans to be. But the Africans that he was around happened to be animals. So when Edgar Rice Burroughs was writing this whole thing, was basically an allegory to show white man's dominance over the quote-unquote animals of Africa, meaning the black man, black woman, and everything that exists there, but also the idea of integrating Caucasian consciousness into the seductive idea, into adopting aspects of another culture through accoutrements. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to necessarily join the tribe, but I want to wear the feathers of the tribe and dress like that when I go back to Victorian Europe. But Victorian Europe was basically the beginning of what we'll perceive as Western or modern Western civilization. Modern Western civilization in the extrapolated context. Meaning that Victorian Europe or Edwardian Europe was the height of the so-called British Empire that had its beginnings as the Brutish or Brutish Moorish Empire of Albion, under the darker Moors that existed in Europa prior to the purgings of 1492, 1555, 1666, and 1913 and 1933. Those wars in a successive nature as they changed the whole face of what we perceive as Europa from that point to the point it became Europe. So because America financed the basic bankroll of that whole restabilization of that entire region to push the Soviets out, these countries fell into the debt of the United States. And this is when the United States saw its greatest period between, let's say, the end of the war, World War II, and, let's say, 1984. It was, as much as they love Reagan, he was the one who created the system of shutting down all the American homegrown companies and things like that. He was the one who implemented what they call voodoo economics, or trickle-down economics, that basically led to the operation of how crack and things like that was going to be flipped for weapons, and then how to use the subsidies of all of the offenders that they bag up from the crack sales and crack using and crack deaths, and then funnel them into the internal system of the Department of Justice, which was really just a means to reorganize and reassess those original people who had themselves cut off from their original nationality after 1956. So what we're then saying is that the birth pangs of the civil rights movement was really an operation to get us out of the ability to claim any real traditional or nationalistic roots based upon the open space between all of the old cases that had to be reconciled between 1956 and 1960, when the United States will formally relinquish the jurisdiction of it under the so-called Barbary powers or Barbary states. So the reason why Moors is getting jammed up and put in different positions when they file certain paperwork is because most of the paperwork you're filing is due to a commercial sense, and you're trying to reclaim this access to straw man when really you need to be filing with the Department of Justice off the rip, because they're the ones who are only bound to deal with the filing of us as a freehold inheritance based upon the cases of those of us that were not part of the civil rights program or system that were now being forced upon those original wars through the ruse of coming together in equal rights. The more we fought for equal rights, our national birthright and inheritance was then put further in the background. And because most of the modern groups were involved in internal struggles with themselves, as well as the outside FBI organizations and things like that, nobody did acknowledge that they were still practicing Yakub's trick knowledge. And so the proper placement of the United States as an intermediary government or intermediary force between us and any other foreign nation became more of the predominant when the true American Republic that was founded prior to the Constitution in the Articles of Association, in the Articles of Confederation, in the Watakan Constitution, in the Iroquois Confederacy, as told by House Joint Resolution 331, basically put us on the out. So instead of dealing with our own, it would have been more prudent for us to claim things like Blackfoot or Tar Heel or whatever, even if you didn't know that the Blackfoot is the Peary or the Cherokee is the Sadagi, things like that. Even if you know that, it's more important for you to claim that than claim a foreign nationality. So think about this. They allegedly took everybody that's over here that's so-called black or so-called African from Africa as slaves, right? So if that's the case, why don't you call the people in the West Indies West Africans instead of West Indians? The term Indian or Indus is bringing us back to the Indus Valley, which not only represented what was going on in Harappa, but Harappa was just as a satellite society of the society. It was already indigenously over here. You got to really go back to your lessons and look at the actual root of what's being said. You have always been here. But being here on this landmass that we call, quote-unquote, the Americas, as it was one part of an entire landmass that, let's say, we'll call, for some people, Pangea, or let's say the supercontinent. And then even before then, when there was a time before, quote-unquote, souls. So before the time of souls, before the time of actual creation is when you have always existed here. But here is a state of mind and a place of birth that is associated with a consciousness and a stature based on that consciousness that realizes you do that society that you exist in physically. Therefore, if you are claiming descent from those who claim to come from the plains of Morocco and settled in America and blah, 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 you are still claiming a foreign nationality as a Moor. The original flag that we had was just red. It had no green star. The green star that was put on the flag came after a point in which both sides of the so-called Moorish family was going to be amalgamated or put through this unifying process through the so-called United States in its original capacity as an interface between those of us that was always here, connected to the Monarchian Empire, with the Moundia, all of that. So the indigenous so when we look at that, we have to re-examine the aspects of what it is we are truly saying and what it is we are truly claiming when we come to a certain perspective as to what it is we're going to be telling people we are. Or what it is we perceive ourselves to be in a nationalistic context. So anything that you put in a context before yourself then becomes the aspect. So like Superman denotes a certain type of man. But man is man. And if man that is man is then manifested in the realization of God, man becomes God when man realizes that man has always been a part of it. As they say, God is realized in man when man is realized in God. So therefore, the different aspects, or let's say components that make up what this so-called thing is, has to be separated from what it is these people are doing. So when it comes to setting up a basic state, or what the United States is, the 48 star in a row flag that the United States Lexology has listed to them as the historic flag, then is the true flag of those 48 state, 13 zone, 48 state groupings that consisted in what they refer to as the Iroquois or Algonquin or Monarchian or Dugdamoundian Empire. Dugdamoundia up until they allied themselves with the French. Once they allied themselves with the French through the birth of the Maison de Rouge, that made them enemies of the other Moors who were against the French or Franciscans, who were people like Toussaint. This also explains why after the Louisiana Purchase, everything went through so fast, because Napoleon wanted out of the whole thing because he was losing too much to his Masonic brother, Toussaint, who was basically politicking for the navies that existed amongst the original nations that had always had their sovereignty. Nations like Palmyra, nations like Haiti, nations like... But see, the racial thing comes in to confuse everybody, because when you talk about the French coming in, you always thinking about these Caucasian people. And because you see all of these movies with these Caucasian people in it, you think they're always talking about them, and that they somehow went to Africa and took all of these African slaves and then brought them over to Haiti and then let them run in Haiti, and then they eventually was able to create voodoo somehow and then push them off the island, and then somehow split the island in between them and the Haitians who spoke Spanish. So the Haitians spoke French, they're on one side of the island. Haitians who spoke Spanish, they're on the other side of the island. And then this becomes, what, history? This is how they did it? That's how it happened? Well, they say Toussaint was a slave, but then every picture I see of him, he's in an admiral's uniform. If you were in an admiral's uniform, that means you had a navy under you. That means you could not have been a slave, or if you were a slave, you were a slave who had a lot of money and told a lot of people what to do. Which that in itself is an oxymoron, which then proves the futility of what it is they're trying to push in terms of history of what happened in this part of the world. So if the Arawaks was the first people here, then who were the Caribs? Where did the Caribs come from? How did they manifest here? You know what I'm saying? So these things come into a greater view now when you bring into other groups now, the Maroons and these people who fought the British, and then eventually when certain slaves were escaping based on their treaties with the British, they gave the British the people. But again, this is all put into a black and white context because we are perceiving it from a master-slave perspective when we're really dealing with a corporate indentured servant perspective of Moors who were dark-skinned, who were trying to take the birthright of their brothers and sisters that was always here, who were dark-skinned but did things in a different way. It's just that, and then in between them were the serfs or the slaves or the Circassians or the Mamluks or the Mudehars or the mestizos or whatever that they want to say the present white person was at the time that was being brokered through the traditional act of enslaving the younger races. That was imposed from ancient times from the codes of Hammurabi, who put forth the codes of how to deal with, the integration of mankind and beast of burden as he produced it. But in essence, it's talking about the ongoing aspect of civilization as it's moving into what we perceive the future, based on the new aspects of industry that were being brought forth from the ancient world, all culminating into somewhere around 832 AD, the unification of the Abbasid Caliphate. What made the Abbasids is that they had the black flag that they basically run. But this is Islam in terms of the religion, being that this is what they was putting the quote unquote Philistine, now Bedouin type of what would now be Arab people under in terms of religion, but then those of the blood of the Prophet's father, who was, again, the Moors from Abyssinia and stuff like that, they was practicing this universal melanin dark magic thing that was being put forth in works like what Rumi was doing and Ibn al-Arabi and some of the Sufic masters from the Order of the Rose, things like that. All of that was being culminated around this period and was being spread all over. But again, that still represented what was going on over there. Over here, you know what I mean? We was dealing with the consolidation of what we perceive as the old kingdoms of the West, and how a lot of the descendants of them started moving further to the north. This is how a lot of the Lenape and the Manpaka and these people was basically there, because a lot of us lived in the southern parts of country first and moved up and over. You know what I mean? But when you look at maps, let's say from the 15th period, you'll see maps that say New Granada. From the 15th century, that say New Granada, New Spain, New Philippines, New this, New that. But this, again, is after the fall of the Moors. So if the Spanish were the ones to kick the Moors out and then, renamed it Spain, why would they then rename the dominion that the Moors prior to them had over here? Why would they allow it to still be named New Granada? Because it wasn't Spanish people that set up New Granada in the old Spanish territories. New Granada was actually Moors who were hooked up with the Alamo and all of that. This is why Santa Anna was able to do a lot of the stuff that he was doing, because he had already been raised up in the Scottish rite of the time, but he was also of Moorish blood and nobility. So after the stock market crash in 1929, now jumping ahead, however many thousand years, 1929, the United States became subject to certain restrictions. Because remember, the United States, again, was just basically a tax shelter, an interface that was supposed to be non-biased between the working, commercial, fiduciary, spiritual, whatever relationships between the original people from the land and their cousins in them who was coming over here to do business with them and hopefully stay. But a lot of them was never meant to be a part of the actual republic. You know what I'm saying? But this place or this side of the world, even though it's connected to different dominions, was never done so in the open. Only certain people knew about how to get over here. And that was usually kept from the lower classes. But remember, ambassadors from Sheikh Mexim would come into the royal court. There's paintings of them coming to the royal court in the early 1500s. And this is after the expulsion of the Moors in Granada. So this shows that there was a connection again between us over here and them over there. The difference also being is to what the brutish Moors was dealing with and what we, again, was dealing with over here. Over here, we drink coffee and smoke tobacco. Over there, they drink tea. You know what I'm saying? And smoke hashish, opium and stuff like that. So, yeah, so over here was weed and tobacco and coffee. Over there was like hashish, you know what I'm saying, which is basically hard, heroin or whatever, and tea. But the thing is, the tea, again, was not produced in England. The tea was produced in what is now India, but back then the parts of it was Burma and Hindustan and Delhi. During that period, they used the British East India Company to then get their way into China to get the tea. But up until then, the British really didn't mess with the tea like that, but they just peeped how the Chinese and the Japanese and the Asian people did it, and they figured that they could make it a niche market in Europe. But nobody in Europe liked tea. So these dudes went to the crown and said that y'all should institute an international tea time where everybody in the empire should support the British East India Company by having tea at a certain time. Once they did that, they said, okay, well, from that we could set up an international time zone. You know what I'm saying? To schedule when these things are supposed to happen. So tea became the rage in what they call the elite classes, while in the vulgar masses it became a luxury item that people was killing for. They was moving tea like they was moving crack. So most of the tea that was coming into the Americas wasn't even produced in America. It was tea that the British or the brutish Moors was bringing over here to sell at a premium to the slaves that existed on the colony, who the captains of the colony Moors were put over the jurisdiction of these so-called indentured servants or white slaves who they were responsible for raising up. So it's the same way when you watch the cop show, how, it went from like all of the cops being nothing, all of the cops coming in and being chewed out by the supervisor, where it was always a white guy, and then after Beverly Hills Cop 2, every sergeant was screaming on the cops, and the thing was an angry black dude. And he's always screaming on some white dude like Louis Gossett and Officer and the Gentleman. That type of relationship is what was going on. See what I'm saying? Because they was grooming them and getting them ready to be in position. Although, unbeknownst to them, they were being rooted out of things administratively. You can't make your lawyer your manager. It's cool if your manager was a lawyer, but if your manager is a lawyer and a manager, that could be hard. So it's too many deals and too many side deals based upon fraternal organizations where we could be at war with each other, but then you flash, you're about to kill somebody or whatever, and then they flash you assignment, and based on y'all being in the order, y'all got to get out, or you got to get him out and get him help. That's cool. But to your own people, that might be perceived as being a traitor, and a lot of that went down. So by the time Captain Morgan writes the whole treatise on the Mason thing and they kill him, the whole root of what we perceive as secret societies or things like that were ingrained into the American psyche, based upon things like the Cooper Gang, which was a intelligence organization that was kind of created prior to this thing they had called the Pinkerton, where they came out and was talking about all of that, where they was investigating people and things like that against the British government during the occupation of 1773. So, by the present law basically forbids member banks of the Federal Reserve System that's really not a presidential candidate, cabinet member, or private corporations to transact banking business. You understand? Meaning that every bank that exists today is a leftover throwback bank from all the Confederate banks that they seized during the Civil War. The first Civil War. So all of the money that's left over is all of the money that really started from the labor of those original people who basically went under the wrong jurisdiction after the whole changeover. In essence, we were supposed to maintain the original jurisdiction that we maintained prior to the Emancipation Proclamation. But due to the overabundance of foreign so-called Moors who were now put in the mix of the war, a lot of us indigenous-wise were now had to contend with the fact that these people were now claiming descent based on them being born on the land, which was more advantageous for the United States because any person born on the land of the United States became a citizen of the United States. And at the time, the United States needed citizens to justify itself as a federal government that was instituted by the American Republican form of government to exercise the unified defense in both peacetime and wartime, and for a more perfect union, a union of Moors striving for perfection. Yet, the term Moor, as it pertains in the present context, still is applied to someone of North African descent. North African descent does not necessarily exist. It only exists in the mind of the disoriented. In the mind of those who are schooled in the Grand Orient, North Africa would represent the birthplace of what is now Carthage. You know what I'm saying? It's all how you look at it and all how they explain it to you. So, based on these English aspect opinions and definitions, those are still foreign jurisdictional terms that correspond with aspects of you as being foreign to not only yourself, but the place of your birth. So during this new moon period, I would like us to look at and examine the things that we use to define ourselves in the context by which we can truly pull the best out of it and fully realize what it is we are really saying and talking about when we are explaining or trying to or striving to define what and who we are to ourselves first. So when one says more, see, when you say Indian and you're black, that denotes in the minds of people that you come from black people who somehow escaped to Indian people for freedom. When in actuality, it was the reverse. It was white people who escaped persecution from other white people and ran into the woods and stuff like that and came upon these civilizations, these longhouse civilizations of original people who taught them certain ways, and then they took that and moved further out west into the plains and things like that and adopted the names and ways of what they were taught by the ancients who already existed, what they refer to as the Big Buffalo people, us. Quetzalcoatl is Osiris, but Quetzalcoatl is also quartz. Quartz crystal, which represents the eye, which is a quartz crystal once hardened. So when we look at more, the first definition, we have M-A-U-R. Then we have M-O-R-E. Then we have M-O-U-R-E. Then we have M-O-W-R-E. Then we have M-O-U-R-E. Then we have M-O-O-R-E. Then we have M-O-O-R. Then we have M-U-U-R. What does this mean? Which one of those mores represents you? Which one of those mores or ways of writing more is the more that you're writing in whatever paperwork or whatever it is you're presenting or putting out? Do you know which one associates to which nation? M-A-U-R would be a more modern, let's say, Latin version, having its roots in Canaanite and Phoenician. M-O-R-E is more of, let's say, an Americanized version. M-O-U-R-E would be, let's say, an old English version, and M-O-W-R-E would be like an old German influence or Teutonic influence, much like M-O-H-R. It's another version more. Then M-O-U-R-E is more modern Spanish, Castilian way. Then M-O-O-R-E would be more British, United Kingdomish. And then MOOR would be definitely Old English pronunciation. Then MUUR then would represent those of us over here. So as we see, these each represent a different nationality. You know what I'm saying? In that one context. But then to go further, may possibly be from some ancient North African language. Again, North African, bringing us to Carthage, bringing us to Phoenicia, bringing us to Moab, bringing us to the tribes of Ben Ishmael, bringing us to those of us, again, bringing us to something on the old, quote-unquote, side of the world. Now, to go further, it says, in ancient history, a native is that word, native, somebody from somewhere else, native of Mauritania, a region of northern Africa corresponding to parts of Morocco and Algeria. So this, again, represents the Moors of the old dominion, of the old empire, of the old, quote-unquote, Barbary states that were foreign to this aspect of the world, or the Moors that were already here. Yet the Moors that were already here were being represented or called Indians because they were independent, or let's say undependent of what was going on in terms of the old world. The only way that this came together was through a guy they called the Great Governor of the World, spoken of in the last Articles of the Federation, who modern American historians would represent as God, right? But really it represented the Sultan or Grand Senor Mohammed bin Abdullah III, I think. The same guy that was being petitioned, that Washington was petitioning not to enslave any more Freemasonic, quote-unquote, Christians, because they were now being put in stewardship of the old American Republic that had certain old relationships with the old Moors of the old world, but now that they were switching their representation, they needed time to recalibrate and gain some money to be able to pay back whatever the old administration owed him. This is what brought the Treaty of Peace and Friendship to exist, not between the Moors of the so-called British Empire as a quote-unquote Caucasian empire, but the British Empire or British Empire of His Britannic Majesty that was connected to the original quote-unquote Holy Roman Empire through those black Moors who were at the time considered European or European based upon their geographic location as being foreign to the original people, us, that already existed in North Central South America and the adjoining islands. So we're not necessarily talking about the intrusion or the erudition or erudition of our society to some quote-unquote majestic Columbus white man. What we're really seeing is the universal destruction of us to aspects of ourselves, because shit got so hot on the other side of the world that aspects of us wanted to come over here and basically take the birthright of the original Moors or the original people who had already existed here in North Central South America, of which the quote-unquote Caucasian slave was used as a tool of war and as a means to create the need to perpetuate a slave caste over here that would eventually use to encompass other Moors who were born here into that. So to justify that, people or foreign Moors in Africa who already knew about this place, who had already been coming over here back and forth a century, decided that this would be a good time for them to get rid of all of their criminals and stuff like that they didn't want to deal with and send them over here, being that it was already predicted universally that the original people, the original tribe of Ben Ishmael, would fall into a time of decadence, which could be translated as a form of sleep or amnesia. And so what I'm saying is that everybody took advantage of that. So it goes on to say in this definition, in later times, one belonging to a people of mixed Berber and Arab race. There's no such thing as an Arab, and what we call Berbers are really Bedouin, which really have original houses of the Tuareg and the Garamat and the Hausa and tribes like that, or what are considered tribes like that, who really descend back to the ancient North African Carthaginians that we're talking about. Again, black people, but black people from that part of the world, not indigenous or what we would consider original, what some people say aboriginal aspects of us being born here. But when I say being born here, like I said, I'm talking about being born in this side of the world. So in the race of the Mohammedan religion, you know what I'm saying, when they say Mohammedan, Mohammedan, Mohammedan or Median or Medinian or Midianite, again, they're talking about people who are subscribing not to the religion of Islam, but to the culture, but also to the original aspect of what the culture was, Moorish. The term Arab, again, was a British way of getting rid of the word Moor, who are now being redesignated as Bedouins or whatever, based on a revision of history. All of this constitutes the bulk of population of northwestern Africa, and who in the 8th compass Spain. See? In the Middle Ages and as late as the 17th, Moors were commonly supposedly mostly black, or very swarthy, though the existence of white Moors was recognized, and hence the word often was used for Negro. And hence the word was often used for Negro, black or Moor. See? So I'm not saying that we're not Moors, because a lot of us were Negroes, and Negroes do become Moors. But what I'm also saying is that Moor is not necessarily a designation that identifies you specifically as a specific Moor from this hemisphere, or from the indigenous line that you may claim. Thereby, you commit an unbeknownst fraud. You see what I'm saying? So in this new moon energy, all I'm saying is that we need to really isolate and understand how a lot of this quote-unquote energy manifests from. So the people that they refer to as the Olmec in the Bible would be referred to as the Jaredites. This due to the jaguar aspect of the people, as well as the biblical inference. So when most of the time you read the Bible, you're mostly thinking about it in the context of the old world where most of this stuff happened. Yet most of the stuff in the old world is named after stuff that was already here, that was older, and renamed by the people who left from this side and went over there and set up shop and then created a mythology to cooperate that. And thereby, in understanding yourself as a true individual, it would behoove you to understand what line or whatever you are claiming. You know what I'm saying? So for instance, in the Moorish Circle 7 Quran, it says, hold on. It says, time never was when man was not. If life of man at any time began, a time would come when it would end. Time never was when man was not. If life of a man at any time began, a time would come when it would end. The thoughts of Allah cannot be circumscribed. No infinite mind can comprehend things infinite. All infinite things are subject unto change. All finite things will cease to be because there was a time when they were not. The bodies and souls of men are finite things, and they will change. Yea, from the finite point of view, the time will come when they will be no more. But man himself, as not the body, nor the soul, he is a spirit and part of Allah. Arm, leg, arm, head. Creator state gave to man, or spirit man, a soul that he might function on the plane of soul. Gave him a body of flesh that he might function on the plane of things made manifest. Why did Creator state give to spirit man a soul that he might function on the plane of soul? Why did the Creator state give the soul of a body of flesh that he might not function in the plane of things that are made manifest? Hear now, ye cherubim. Hear now, ye seraphim, angels, and ye men. Hear now of the protoplast of the earth and plant and beast. Hear now the creeping things of the earth, ye that fish, ye birds that fly. Hear now winds that blow, ye thunders, ye lightnings of the sky. Hear now, ye spirits of fire, water, air, and earth. Hear now, O everything that is or was, evermore will be, or wisdom speaks from out of the highest plane of spirit life. Man is a thought of Allah, arm, leg, arm, head. All thoughts of Allah, arm, leg, arm, head, are infinite. They are not measured up by time, for things that are concerned with time begin and end. So what that essentially says is that there was never a time in which you were not a part of everything that is. Therefore, one aspect of that is the fruit who understands the purpose of why it is sweet. It is to excite the memory within the protoplasm, to ignite within us the spiritual resurrection to create something better. This is why Noble Jew Ali said in the quotations of the Prophet that there would be a time when the new Moors would come and tell the old Moors to sit in the back. This was not meant to diss the past, but it is meant to say that there has to be a huge revolution as to what we are on the cusp of. And it's not just about us. We are in no state, no matter how civil and ready you are or us are, to hold court in any world venue that they are going to fully recognize, unless we are all understanding what position and how it is we fell in the position in the first place. And that was because those of us that was already here differed in opinion and nationality and national political view from those of us that was just coming over here. But those of us that was just coming over here was then trying to look down on those of us that was already here and find ways into the government by marrying into the actual bloodline of the family, or getting a slave to marry into the bloodline of the family and thereby taking over. This is how Washington's family came up out of the whole Washington old Saxon family, out of old Southwestern, which is now Umbria or something like that, or was Umbria. And they came over here and set up a plantation in Virginia, in the Baron Decameron, a day. And Washington grew up, but because of his Masonic ties and where he came from, he was able to see the inner lands of the world and the cities and stuff that existed here prior to these Europeans who were only locked up in the plantations and the colonies. The captains of the colonies, the days of the colonies, were all Moors, were all black people. But the term Moor at the time was foreign to the initial terms or the language of speak that we was already speaking here. So, yeah, we understood Moor and American in that sense. Yet, if you do the knowledge to the positioning of that, what they receive as tribes, or what was reduced to Indian tribes, became the basic standard of how each nation was recognized. There was the overall confederacy of all nations under the great law of Guyana-Nashua, which was the great law of Ma'at. But the days of the cities in the Grand Canyon, but the days of the cities and all of that in the Grand Canyon had come to an end. So the remnants of those populations mixed with, moved further back north to the continent and peopled all of that. And then those of us that was coming out of Laventa did the same thing, merged with the Washoe, and then a couple hundred years later it becomes Washita. You know what I'm saying, and so forth and so on. But once they let the French in, see what I'm saying, they allied themselves with a foreign power, which then left the illegal Louisiana Purchase to go through, because they had already used the spies, the Pinkerton spies, Lewis and Clark, to do the expedition by kidnapping the princess, Sacagawea, who allegedly was one of the granddaughters of Benjamin Banneker Bay. But either way, all of that, like I said, is American legend that because we have been taught to hate America, we don't get into. When really that's where all our money's at. They showed you in National Treasure that the Golden Pyramid City was under the Black Hills. You know what I'm saying? Black Hills is Mount Rushmore. What else they hiding? You gotta understand, they build this thing like a Monopoly chessboard. They build things to destroy them. They build things to last a certain amount of time to do these things. Because this is how the society since the Holy Roman Empire has become so decadent. But because they created this whole illusion of the Roman state to you, which was really just, again, a earlier version of the American Republic, which is why they call America Rome, and call both of them together Chemical Egypt, because of Brother Jay. It basically shows you how all of this has come into the universal, unilateral context of what we perceive as nationality. And how, if, okay, you're going to claim Moorish nationality, then great. Just be specific as to what that understands, and just know that if they create some heinous law or whatever where they want to intern Moors or whatever, you put yourself in a jurisdiction or a term, per se, that they can use like any other. The jurisdiction comes from the inference. So if you look at the movie Vantage Point, the whole operation went down in Morocco. You know what I'm saying? Look at that movie again. Look what they was flipping in that. And how eerily similar it is to some of the events that's going on now with the Syria thing and all of that. Based upon none of the real money worked. Also, due to the history of white slavery in America, that's going to become a big thing in the future. Because the more we wake up into the context of what a real American really is and what those contexts really represent, they're going to start to try to use the race card as a means to basically say, okay, well, you niggas want change and power and all that, and you got to give us money and stuff back, because basically if you was enslaving us, you know what I'm saying, they're going to start to cop to real history. So a lot of wild stuff going to start coming out about people's background and then, you know, racial attacks and stuff like that, all to help perpetuate this racial crescendo that they want to foment into this world war. What most people think is 3, I call 5 thing, where they are consolidating your resources to hopefully break away into Antarctica again, and hopefully from that go into the inner Earth, or go into space, or some of the other erroneous, irrelevant ideas that they have tried to consider to do or get you to believe that they could do so they could get the spiritual willpower to somehow manifest it. And this whole thing happens also because the Federal Reserve has switched its whole stance up on a lot of things. This is now a precursor to a financial standoff between the European Union and the America. Basically, they're switching it up, saying that we ain't going to bail out nobody that's foreign. Because the Federal Reserve is really holding everybody's money, not just the United States. They're holding everybody in the world's money, because everybody in the world basically got a Federal Reserve Bank. And those countries that don't have a Federal Reserve Bank are basically doing really well. That's why you don't hear about the Central African Republic until very recently. That's why you don't hear about Bahrain really like that. You don't really hear about Stad. You don't really hear about anything going on in Norway until recently. Because they're trying to extend a jurisdictional boundary between those countries that are going to use natural materials as money and those countries that's going to keep using credit and debt. And any country that ain't using credit and debt has got to get gobbled up quick. Because once they get put on the gold stand, it's a wrap. Once Gaddafi tried to put him on a gold standard, it was a wrap. Once Saddam tried to put him on a gold standard, it was a wrap. Once Idi Amin started messing with gold, it was a wrap. Once what's the other one? Sadat was trying to get gold for the PLO through dealing with NASA, it was a wrap. They put two in NASA's head. They can't afford to not be in a system where they can do that, because then there's not enough gold for them to have, because then they're going to have to basically give the whole government over to Rothschild and them, which they have, but it would have to be like a formal thing. So because they've set up a monarchical system or a monarchy system or a monarch system in the American mind populace, they've already created a nobility class, which is the people on TV or the people who are considered celebrities. These people, or people like that, are used or basically are seen again as the new American royalty, which we see in movies like The Hunger Games and things like that, gets taken to drastic levels of depravity and human sacrifice. This has been the first era in history, in movie history, where you've seen open ritual child killing in such movies like The Hunger Games, things like this, Twilight and all of that. And it's all good. So why not have Yakub on TV? Like I think it's really a good time, and really shows us that during this new moon period that anything is really possible to actualize into the world, you know, and use that energy to harvest what it is you move, because it promotes growth on all levels, and because it's sixth house Virgo, it went to the sixth house in Virgo on the 15th. It was really a good time to ground the analysis, organization, you know what I mean, precision, focus, healing the body. This is a good time to get a lot of that stuff popping. You know what I mean? This is also why you'll probably hear about another like sex scandal between celebrities as well, because in the Virgo period is when a lot of this stuff pops off. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people are searching and trying to acquire beauty, but upon the analysis of the beauty, they find that most of the things they're looking at are ugly. So it creates a codependent or a dualistic relationship between the individual, which then creates, again, a self, what I would define, remember you heard it here first, as a self-denationalizing gene that denationalizes you from the nation of your own self into a perception of yourself. And then that perception of yourself is unified or brought on by other people who accept that perception. And then y'all all have that. So of a certain mind period for decades of millions of years, there's been a certain perception or mind state of us who wear feathers. There's nothing wrong with that. We should continue to do that. Yet, not everybody who wore the fez was of a specific nationality. They were from different nationalities and worshipped and dealt with different things that we don't even remember anymore. Yet those of us that are coming into consciousness of those things are finding it hard to associate that or put that in the confines of what exists now as a perceived Moorish culture or Moorish American culture, which again by its own designation puts itself outside of American or America as an indigenous or original or what some people would say or not say aboriginal beginning. So all I'm saying is let's be specific. That's what Virgo is about. Specificity. I mean, making sure all the details is in. So it's definitely a good time to initiate this new energy into your existence. And that's the beauty about astrology and astronomy and its own things, that there's always new energy being put forth from the cosmos. There's never a point of the energies where it's like you hear somebody from astrology saying, oh, well, it's giving you a lot of old energy. No, the universe don't give you nothing old. You give yourself old stuff. Because as humans, we have a nature, as men and women, we have a nature of holding on to things. and in return those things hold on to us. So there's a super nationality that we are really all a part of, that we are not even beginning, that we're not, I think, collectively dealing with. But to do that, we have to understand what side or what aspect of this we are all coming from, and that there's a place for everybody to be able to exist in the present state or an evolved state of their present state within that, so long as they all subscribe to the same idea. That the original man, the original woman, the original child is the archetype of the Most High within all things. And when I say original man, original, I'm saying specifically original black people, you know what I'm saying? But I'm also saying anyone who's dealing in their original state of mind, and that's not many of us, man. White, black, Puerto Rican, Chinese, whatever. If you're dealing in your own state of mind, what you believe and what you are thinking is your thoughts, then that makes you an original person. Because most of the people who are professing the opposite, who are professing that they know this and they doing that and all of that, are internally the opposite. And it's coming out now. You're seeing it more. It's better to know somebody's open, so it's better that Frank Ocean come out and say that he gay. That's admirable. That's why you respect him. Yet, that also put him in a category, in a state where he's destined to receive certain things. Good, but a lot bad, which is amplified from the ritual abuse that he may have suffered coming up as a person to be able to be the poster child for this now. But it's obvious there's something troubling the brother. Maybe he don't want to do that. Maybe you don't want to be that. Maybe whatever. You never know. But because we live in a society where it's assumed that you should want to be, or if somebody is, you should be cool with that, then something wrong with you if it's not. That's not a society. That's a mob. That's mob rule. So when they tell you that the Somnia and the rest of them that was fighting against the French was fighting solely against Caucasian people, they're not being honest. When you read the Black Jacobins and the Gilded Prince and really good books on Toussaint and what happened during that period, doing the Quantum Leap, things like that, you would understand that they were dealing with a spiritual war that was happening in the bloodline of original people that was split down based upon cultural lines. Those of them that was dealing with the old Morisco French, and then them was dealing with the old Morisco Spanish, Franciscan. And that puts them at odds. Talks about the mulattoes and the Moriscos and how they were put above this and based on all of that. All of that was created by black people. That's what black people be doing to each other. How can white people create that for us when they was under our jurisdiction under the period, during that time? They was all under the jurisdiction of the Grand Senor at Baghdad, and that was a black, and those were all black people. Up until very recently, up until 1914. So what are they talking about? These people just got free. These people just got to be able to build ships and be on the sea and not get them swallowed up, not get them taken. They still doing it. They still getting their ships taken by niggas in wrath. You know what I'm saying? It's a different thing when you out there, man. And that's what they try to get you to think. So they want us to think that, oh, it's a coincidence. How come you ain't tell me that Frederick Douglass was the first ambassador to Haiti? Well, that make a lot of sense. Why didn't you tell me this happened after he left his black wife for the white lady? After he joined the social club of the day. Just don't mean that he wasn't a great man and he didn't write a lot of great things for the heroic things for slaves. That didn't apply to me. And that didn't apply to the people that he was around mostly. Most of the black people he was around was free. The slaves that he was talking about was people that he was hearing about. And people that was coming back from the wars and was prisoners of wars and was being sold in the colony periods and where he was getting his money at. Look at it for what it is and not what they're hyped it to be, and you get the bigger picture. You get to see this has always been about what we perceive ourselves to be. This has all been what man has chosen itself to represent itself as. So version of you as an original man is an original version of it as a quote-unquote white man or white woman, because it is the exact opposite of you. Because, again, based upon genetic war, things that was going on with us from ancient times to now, we have not reconciled that because we brought it outside of us. We're the only race that did that. Everybody else was procured naturally, meaning that after a certain period, after certain months in Machu Picchu, they looked one way based upon the altitude and what we was like and what we was dealing with. Then in Egypt, they was another way. Then in Samaria, they was another way. But eventually, when we left these places, our children or these races that we now consider Arab or whatever moved into these places and eventually became that. But they want you to believe that when you walked up into Europe, that somehow you stayed there long enough and became a white man. If that's the case, then how come you don't see that today? How come all the black people in Europe today ain't white? How come name changed? They've been there for about 100 some odd years, 200, over 600 years, a lot of them. How come they ain't turned into white people? What's up with that? Like Cat Williams said, if this nigga came from a monkey, if I came from a monkey, then how come the monkey's still here? This nigga came from a monkey, how come the monkey's still here? Well, the monkey is evidence of the genetic experiment that exists, and that has to exist in order for them to learn more about themselves. Because unfortunately, their ancient ancestors had sex with a lot of different animals and was made to have a lot of different sex with a lot of different animals. And this was procured in the bloodline and the gene of them for a certain amount of time. This can be verified in a lot of books, 12 Secrets of the Caucasus, Iceman Inheritance, all the ones I've talked about, and other ones I haven't. But again, I'm not saying this to downgrade somebody's culture or somebody genetically today. You know what I'm saying? Because I've seen melanated people debase themselves even worse. And they got goddamn common sense. So what's the excuse in that? You're talking about a devolvement or an acceptance of failure. A de-evolution of people who have just given up and have decided that it's better to join them than beat them. And now that we've done that, there's a lot of, quote-unquote, other people from other nationalities that's mad at us because now we look like, oh, y'all niggas actually the original people, but now y'all just letting us just do all of this. Y'all ain't shit. And it continues like that. But then we do things to astound them. We make millions of dollars over just being us. We're the only race in the world that do that. Us and Chinese people. You know what I'm saying? That's it. We're the only two races that just make money off of us. You know what I mean? Like a Chinese national can go to any store, go to any bank, and get a loan. Not because he's Chinese, because banks know that people in America live over Chinese food. So it's a win-win. It's natural. You know what I'm saying? Yes, it's stereotypical. Yes, it's somewhat racist. But in the end, it's bottom line for them. It's business. If I, a black man, want to go in and open up a convenience store, I'm going to have a little problem. Because it's statistically proven by them in their mind that black people only trust convenience stores that's owned by Arab people or anybody that's not black. So therefore, I'm a risk. So I might not get the loan. So yes, it's stereotypical, yes, it's racial, but in the end, it's still bottom line. You see what I'm saying? That's how America works. That's America. That's the country. That's what it is. What you put in the shit is what you get out of it. That's all. That's all it is. So what I'm starting to peep was the more me and the Queen was going through and striving to just scrape a dollar together to survive, made it harder to survive at some point. The more we have allowed ourselves to be like, you know what, this has got to happen. It's happened. It's been happening. You see what I'm saying? Because we're willing it to happen and allowing it to do so by doing the work to do it. All we can do is what we can do to do it. All you can do is what you can do to do it. And we can all agree that we can do it like this. then we will understand that the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was not necessarily a treaty between, again, the United States in that was still under the jurisdiction technically of Britain. So it really was between His Britannic Majesty and the Moors that the United States had to look out for. But it was the Moors that was associated through the amnesty agreement between the Britannic Majesty and His Majesty, the Sultan of Morocco, spoken of in the Merchant of Venice, and his subjects, i.e., free Sundri Moors who were associated with the Emperor of Morocco. Therefore, those Moors who are claiming aspects or descent by using, let's say, the foreign aspect of the flag, right, represent those Moors who became indigenous by coming over here and being here. And you today are claiming descent from those people, but those are not the original Moorish people who existed here prior to those Moors getting here. That's what I'm saying. And we all should want to associate and understand who is who, so that way we understand why this whole thing got that way. Because once we get to the Bible, this basically makes a lot of arguments that exist today moot. Maybe these people, maybe if we trace the roots of, let's say, the Zulu expedition that came over here, you know what I'm saying, with some of the Mayan Moors, maybe, and let's say they settled in Detroit in a certain area, maybe the original people who existed in this area after that point were predominantly warlike, or warlike because they come from a long line of indigenous, of Moors who came over here from another part of the world who had within them the Zulu trait, which is, again, the Martian trait of Aries and war and all of that in their bloodline, which explains why Detroit is so popular today. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that that is a representation of how we can then start to isolate who is who. This is why we had the tribe of Ben Ishmael migration pattern, in which we all, from different parts of the nationality, sent somebody to represent us, or we all went and walked across the entire country, the hemisphere in that sense. And why those migration patterns had to be stopped. Those people who are calling themselves Indian today are descendants of Caucasian, original people, and Chinese people who were caught up in the so-called wars between 1875 and 1887, which ended with Teddy Roosevelt killing all of them people with the Rough Riders, all of the original Moors with the Rough Riders, and the Wounded Knee thing that eventually, the Wounded Knee thing that eventually ended up with the last battle where Rough Riders slaughtered all those original people, and created or left way for the creation of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But here go the funny thing. American Indians don't fall under that perspective, under that jurisdiction. Only Native Americans. Because Native Americans, again, are Caucasian people who, again, descend from white people who were classified as savages by white people because they left the confinements of the plantation and all of that and lived amongst all of that. What do you think Last of the Mohicans and all of that shit was about? They show you in the movie. These white people bounced. They lived amongst these original people, or during the fights, some of these people were kidnapped and given civilization and given a form of understanding or whatever. And enough of them that did that eventually became a nation amongst themselves. And they were allowed to adopt the name of the traditional nation that existed from them by the Big Buffalo people. And then we become the gods of their myth, because now we have graduated to the point where we have already set up the Iroquois Confederacy and is dealing with these people as an international spiritual body, international, by the 1700s. But by the late 1800s, everything that we was basically starting to establish or work with had basically come to pieces because all of these people consolidated themselves together against us, and they started processing more immigrants in here and us out. So it became a ebb and flow of killing as many of us as they can and bringing as many of them in as they can, back and forth. So between the years of the late 1800s and, let's say, 1945, most of the people in jail and real jails was all white male, predominantly white male in America, whereas all the black people was put in the chain gang in the South to work and build city buildings and all of that. Because we was the only ones who knew how to do it ancestrally, because all the white folks after the civil rights thing, after the Civil War, whatever, had no job options. They had no skills. So from their labor unions, they organized them into what became the corrections racket, in which they always basically able to become cops without guns and lock niggas down through the whole chain gang thing. So you just have one dude on a horse with a shotgun, and everybody do the work. Whereas the white people languish away in the holding pen. But this allowed them to be able to hide how many white males and people like that was being locked up after the Roaring '20s. With Al Capone and the rest of these dudes, many of these people shooting and killing everybody. All Moriscos, not seen as white people. Half of one. All seen as all not seen as white people by the predominant white establishment that was Protestant and Freemasonic. Bound to keep the secret of how they were able to come into affluence and power during these times. Because this is synonymous with all of the banking crazy shit that they was already building in the sidelines, while we were dealing with them as a world power in terms of the Turkish Osmanli or Ottoman Turkish Empire's allegiance with us against everybody in Europe, basically. So all of these things lie in this woman being pit in between these two flags. This is also to set up a possible run for her as president in the future, to be able to solidify a dynastic power base, open power base of the so-called Clinton as the ascendant American predominant family over now the Bushes. You know what I'm saying? The Clintons are the nice Bushes. And so, you got to remember Hillary was allegedly Huey's lawyer at one point, and helped him in the initial case where they rolled up on Ronald Reagan with the heat when he first was coming out, who Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy were open FBI informants from the RIP, which just helps in their ascendancy and why he's so revered by them. Allegedly, your man Eastwood is trying to play him in the movie. So all of this is being played out now in her basically giving this address. But in this, you got to listen to what she was talking about. You know what I'm saying? Don't be caught up in the hype. See it for what it is. Spiritually, symbolically, it's a great synchronicity. Yet, we have to really look at the political context that it's been put in before we lawfully say that it's somehow connected to us in the apparent. We know that they speak through the occult, through the gesture and the symbol and the sign. Yet, that's the way of the devil. The way of God is just saying what it is. You know what I'm saying? So you got to be able to discern who's who, what's what. So let's get into some calls. 804, what's the radio?
Yes. Aseer?
Peace. How you doing?
Peace. How you doing? Great. Look, I was calling because I had a question. It might seem a little. I was calling because I had a question. It might seem a little odd, but well, me and my daughters, we used to live in this apartment, and for some strange reason, like we would see things, and like the radios would like turn up, the TVs would turn off. Like beads would be through, like the little hair beads my daughters used to wear used to be thrown at us. My daughters had even saw like red eyes peering at them out of the closet. We used to hear footsteps coming into our bedrooms. Things would be knocked around. like in our bathroom, like knocked off the shelves and things like that. And I was kind of hoping that, you might be able to, like, give me some kind of, I don't know, kind of like.
Is that what's going on right now? Is that what's going on right now?
Even now, we're in a different house, and we're in a different place, different house now, and stuff will still move around us. We don't even, have to touch anything, and stuff will just move.
Okay. Okay. Well, what you do is you get you some rose water or some roses, right?
Mhm.
And you put them in a bucket and let them sit in there till you like really smell it, to squeeze them into the water, right? Then
Okay.
you clean out the whole crib, right? As best you can.
Mhm.
And then once you clean everything out or whatever, you mop it out with the rose water. Then if you go on my website, I have some brick dust that you can order. And you can get that and lay a line of that in the corners of your house. You know what I mean? Like sprinkle a little bit in the corners of the crib. In the meantime, you can get you some black chili peppers.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And sprinkle them in the areas where you've seen, you know what I mean,
Okay.
issues. You know what I'm saying? And then what you do is when you get the brick dust, you can lay a line of it in the front of your door, so whoever walks into your house has to cross it. And then notice if the energy increases or decreases when the people is around. Or see if it's a problem for them to come in the crib, like if they trip or they drop something or something fall when they come in after you put the dust down. It'll tell you a lot as to who is positive in your life or who isn't. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
It could be somebody trying to put roots on you or something.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Black people do stuff like that. So if there's anybody that you or has been cross with you for whatever reason, or been jealous of you for some other reason, sometimes, if black people do that, you know what I mean? Or people do that. So you gotta be careful. But if you do those things, you should see how it goes. It should help.
I also had another question. I'm sorry. Thank you too. Like the term that most black people use about witches riding people back. I used to deal with that like a lot coming up ever since I could remember. Like I guess about since I was about 10, 11 years old. I've been dealing with stuff like that. And my family, they always say, well, pray to Jesus and call on God and all of that. And I've done that to the fullest extent. And it seemed like just about every night, just about I dealt with it, daytime, nighttime, it didn't matter. And I always wondered, like, what is it?
It's a knowing that something else is going on, that most people are gonna act like it's not, or if it's not aware of, or choose not to be aware of. See, like, some people choose to be perceived. Like most of the spirits and things that surround you and doing this type of stuff, if it is indeed that, is really just residual energy that exists in a transit state, because it can't really be physical. So it has to alter physical things. You know what I'm saying? So when you go to get your keys when you knew they was and they're not there, that's an aspect of all they can do. You see what I'm saying? Because the thought of how that happens allows the energy to build up. You see what I'm saying? So the more things like that happen, the more we give them life. So you almost got to get to a point where you demand that, they go. whoever they are, and that there's nothing else for them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If they're not ancestors, then they need to go. And if they are ancestors, they better be righteous ones or positive ones. If not, they need to go. Literally open the door, kick them out.
Right.
You have more power than you think. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No problem.
Please. Thank you.
No doubt. Be safe.
Thank you.
On 787, you want to Heru Radio?
Yes, can you hear me?
Peace. How you doing, man?
Peace, man. Been listening to you for quite some time now, for about, say more or less about 9 to 10 months, man. 9 to 10 months. I find it quite interesting, man. You talk about stuff that is mind-blowing, man. And it was either basically listen to you or Monday Night Football, and didn't really nothing else going on.
Thanks, bro. That's a good endorsement. That's dope.
I'd like you to just touch upon Dianetics a little bit, because I know Ron Hubbard is not, he's one of those devils, as you would call him.
Yeah.
But, the Dianetics and the subconscious and reactive mind is something I'm really trying to become more self-aware of, because it seems like a world. There's just a world of stuff in there. And that mind is always just picking up on things and stuff like that. And I would just kind of want to know what type of entities or energies can I work with to be more self-aware and, better influence my subconscious.
That's a great question, man. Well, first, the Dianetics is just a bastardized version of Aleister Crowley's what do you call it? One of his science fiction stories he basically wrote. And as Hubbard himself, who was a Navy intelligence officer, was made to become the intimate apprentice of Jack Parsons, he was basically taught to learn what Crowley could know, because technically Crowley was off limits from prosecution in America due to his relationship as an MI6 agent. So any intelligence they could get from him would be great. So they used L. Ron Hubbard to help them conjure the Babylon working on the USS Aldrich, allegedly, and allows them to get a working as to how they could basically set up a cult for themselves that basically could be used to basically mind control the populace to a new quote-unquote religion, just in case there was some sort of racial or religious warfare between, the North and the South, again, the blacks and the Jews and whatever. Yeah. So they use him to set that up. So he basically creates the whole story, or basically adapts the whole story from the Popol Vuh, basically, or Star Wars, basically, and creates it in a form where they can get money. And so he starts to buy old cruise ships and create a thing so that way he wouldn't be localized to any one jurisdiction. So this way he could go anywhere and do what he wanted or whatever, and do the rituals or whatever. So basically he started to run off the reservation, essentially. And eventually got into some things so they couldn't get him, so of course they created the tax thing and then basically try to get him through that. So they lock him up, but in the process of that they debrief him, and then he put him back out there and then basically helped him refund the thing. But then again he crosses them and allows it to become almost like a church-type organization. And from that point on, it became a thing where they could basically create the type of individual they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, they're basically like Mormons. You know what I'm saying? It's just that they don't really have no even like real. basically kind of creation. That's why I don't want people to deal with psychiatrists. Psychiatrists. But a lot of the programming is push people, the drugs and all that. So it's a fight. So they don't really like the Scientology because most of the drug companies, CEOs and stuff, are Catholic, Jesuits. So they don't really like Scientologists because then they tell people not to take drugs. They say is don't take drugs, take our machine. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's a money thing. And then in the background is the United States, like, okay, well, how can I really flip this to my advantage? You know what I mean? So really it's a way to get money real quick. Stay in it, you got to really be rigid. So there's people who have been Scientologists for years. Like, Rerun from What's Happening. A lot of those people. The chick from Love and Hip Hop, the chick that's married to Stevie J baby moms and shit, she was one. So a lot of people have grown up in that, but it's just now you're hearing about it. But all of these were cults that were created after the flower power psychological operation that came out of the civil rights shit to get people, you know what I mean, primed up about to harvest their organs by the 80s, and then by the 90s start cloning niggas. You know what I'm saying? By 2000, 2012, people are like 60% silicone.
Yo.
So, one of the things you could do specifically is to practice to build up
around the block one time. Hello?
So one way to do that is get a deck of cards, right? You got a girl, get a deck of cards, and then lay 5 out, and then get your girl to show them to you or whatever, and then after that, have her mix them up, and then you try to guess each card. Every time you get one right, you write it down and tally it. The more you get right, the more you add another card, so you get the whole deck. Once you got the whole deck, you're basically a full-fledged psychic. You know what I'm saying? Basically, but you got to do it. So you got to dedicate a certain amount of time during the day to just focus on doing that. A lot of people, followers, don't have that time, you know?
Right.
Try that. It works.
I'm going to take that into account. I'm supposed to be seeing somebody that's really, really good with this, you know, what you would call, you know, like demonic entities and stuff like that. So I'm actually in the Caribbean now. I'm calling you.
Entities, though, one thing you got to know is that you're never just dealing with one. You're dealing with a legion. So it could be one, in one altar there could be 1,000, and then in another altar there could only be one. And then in the next altar it would be like 6,000. So you got to remember that the key to any real demonic exorcism is to know the name of the demon. Because really what the demon is, if the demon is internal, then that's either a generational curse or that's somebody who has something put on them or somebody who has been inhabited and don't know it. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, man. And it's really interesting, man, because you're building upon, you know, the Haitians and the history between the Española and then the Moors and stuff. And you was just talking about, like, all the different ways you can spell Moor. And, you know, I've definitely heard of the term Morisco because I'm Dominican-American and I do carry that Haitian blood on me.
Exactly.
So I hear Moor and all that other stuff.
So you're not scared of it. So what happens is that it activates the aspect of in you, which then sees the correlation of things, which then propels the energy of the genetic line that much further. So whatever issue that may have existed in your genetic line has already been resolved by your accepting of both sides of what your heritage really is, which puts you then in the 1 percentile of everybody else who has not.
Man.
You know what I'm saying? So thank you for that, man.
Yo, thanks a lot, man. I'm going to keep on listening, man. Thanks a lot, brother.
Thank you. Peace.
Peace, man.
One more. 662, Super Heru Radio. Last caller for the night.
Hello?
Peace.
Can you hear me?
Peace, I can hear you.
Oh, great. Hi, I'm glad to talk to you. I really enjoyed the show.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
Okay, well, since I'm the last question, I better go and get to it. I wonder why that the voting rights bill hadn't been addressed or changed at this moment in time, because I thought maybe since we had a black president that maybe something had been done to change the voting rights bill that we would no longer need it. And, you know, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it would be great if he was actually a real president of America, but he's not. He's the president of the United States. So in essence, all he can really do is do the administrative business of the administrative office of the presidency of the United States of America. You see what I'm saying? You see how that's different than America or the United States even? So he really is just part of a giant mess machine that has run its course to such a point that all it can do is create a problem. It can no longer, it is in such a disarray that at one point it was created to help fix problems. Now it can only create something by creating a problem. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's perpetually broke. So all he can really do is do what he was meant to do, which is maintain things the way they are until either we come back into a real republic fold, a spiritual understanding as to what we're meant to do ancestrally and then claim that, or they run it into the ground and destroy everything and hopefully able to live in a post-apocalyptic world where they can control what's left of humanity and then build a race where they could eventually go into space. This is what these people are doing. I'm not making it up. Like, so we, we got to know what's important to us and know that we are here for a reason, and that there are some of us who feel that we ain't never really been from anywhere else, even though we from somewhere else. So that means that there's an ancestral genetic line that exists that attaches us based on the conscious level of what we even dealing with. So if it wasn't Super Heru Radio one time, it would be, the way that we put the smoke, where I put the smoke signals up, or the way that I sent the message through the owl or the carrier pigeon or whatever. Yeah. So all we got to do now is just kind of like know what's what, who's who, and then operate with those of us who want to do that in a fashion that hasn't basically been represented yet.
Okay.
And
yes, I understand.
But has an aspect to contribute to that.
Yes.
That doesn't involve anything that anybody else has done other than those of people who did things to get us to this point.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for calling. So that's basically the rub, everybody. For those people who want to learn more about what we're building on tonight, we're having a class this Wednesday night from 9 to 11, the way we've been doing for the past 3.5, almost 4 years now. And it's going to be more engrossing in terms of what it is we're talking about, because there'll be visible representations to further show you some of the why things haven't existed and worked to what can. So with that, please check out www.darkscore418.com to check out the world's most dangerous comic book novel, as well as www.aseertheduketeers.com for any and all of the current merchandise we have, such as the brick dust and the onyx eggs, things like that. Also, definitely check out Team Cordoba on YouTube, TeamCordoba. The song is called Hip Hop Rock. The video is called Hip Hop Rock. It's on YouTube right now. Check it out. And definitely look out also for the album, the soundtrack mixtape album, on iTunes as well as www.darkscope18. So thank you guys for sharing information and building with us, and we'll definitely have some more, and we'll definitely be building with you soon. So definitely please support the homies. Thank you for any and all donations you want to send. You can go to PayPal and put in dukeoftears@gmail.com. That's DUKEOFTIERS@gmail.com. Any donations. And anybody wants to holler at me, email me at houseofel@hotmail.com. Lectures, booking, shows, book signings, whatever. Consultations, readings, natal charts, whatever. So thank you guys again for all the support and helping us build something that's real in a unreal world. Thank you. Peace.